another episode of Yesshift, and I'm Steven, joined by Oliver Wakeman. Dan, Dad couldn't make it to this one, folks. Something came up on his end just a bit ago, but we'll still talk about all these different topics. The expanded edition of From a Page and all this other stuff going on. So for starters, Oliver, throughout March, you did the Wakeman and Son tour with your father. How was that warm up gig before the tour, and did it prepare you for what was to come?
Just going to put slightly stronger glasses on. Oh, that's better. Everything's in focus now. We did the warm up show in Devises, which was very enjoyable, and as with a lot of stuff that I do with Dad, it's the warm up show was slightly on the hoof, as it were. We got together about a week beforehand, went through some bits and pieces, and then we sort of worked out the sort of some of the finer points, during the afternoon before the show, and then we just jumped into it, and we sort of went to see how it would work. What songs would work, what songs wouldn't work, what chat worked, what chat wouldn't work. What bit sort of got the best laughs, and from that, when we went over to the US, we could then sort of slim the show down a little bit to keep in the bits that worked particularly well. And we edited a couple of pieces. We went, oh, that one was too long, that was maybe a bit short, maybe we should extend that. And that's the point of the warm-up show, is to get an idea of how you want it to sort of run when you get sort of show after show after show. So the warm-up show was really good for that, worked really well. It was very
So,
enjoyable as well. It was obviously nice to meet a lot of people again.
yeah, that's great. So, what were some of, or even just a couple of the edits, if you can recall?
I think it was in some of the solo pieces that we were doing. We just realised that when we were joining pieces together, I was playing, and Dad was playing, and I was playing, Dad was playing. If the piece was going a bit too long, we sort of realised, okay, we can cut out a verse of this because it's only instrumental. We can take that out and slim it down and make the pieces that we were doing more of an edited highlights of pieces rather than a true representation. So I did a piano version of The Gift of Love, and the first time we played it, it was overly long, and it didn't need to be that long. It just needed to be some of the main points of the song that you hit along the way. So I think that took about a minute out somewhere. And I mean, we're not talking swathes of music disappearing. We're talking about taking out 30 seconds here and maybe a minute out there, and just uh, you know just making things work a little better.
Okay. So I seen the comments, Adam Parrish chiming in saying, "Hi guys, listening whilst improvising at the keyboard." Haha. And I also see Ray Reithmeyer saying, "Glad to hear from Oliver again. The Wakeman and Son show in St. Charles, Illinois was great and well worth the drive from the Twin Cities." So people have been really positive about the Wakeman and Son shows. Could it happen again in other territories?
Not sure at the moment. I mean, there's some talk about Dad and I doing a few bits in the UK, but I'm not sure it's going to be a thing that gets toured an awful lot, because Dad is starting to try and wind down a lot of the live stuff that he's doing, because obviously he had
Right.
his brain operation last year, and I think he sort of wants to do a big thing with the band next, which obviously doesn't involve me. Um, so I think that's his next focus. But we're doing some shows towards the end of the year, hopefully in the UK. It's still in the planning stages at the moment, but I'm
Okay.
looking forward to anything that comes up like that.
Right. And you've also just done shows in the UK touring the Yes from a Page material, and have more shows in Europe later this year. And you've even had your son Arthur be part of the show. What's that been like, and how's the overall reception been over the setlist selections?
Fantastic, actually. I was phenomenally surprised at how well it went down, and I think that was. I mean, it was quite exhausting, all the rehearsal work and all the planning and preparation before going away with Dad on tour, because originally I was supposed to be in Europe playing with my band in March, And then when the offer came in from Dad, I had to sort of make a decision to move the European shows that were planned for March to November. And so there, but I didn't want to move the UK shows. So I sort of had this crazy situation where I sort of finished one tour on the Sunday night, flew Monday night, arrived back Tuesday, sort of worked out some parts over the next couple of days, went into rehearsals on the Friday and the first show on the Saturday with the band. It was quite, it was, looking back on it, it was absolutely ludicrous, but it seemed to work okay. The show went well. And then we end up, we did another one a couple of days later, and then we had a couple more this weekend. Just gone, and it went down really well. I mean, the audiences were great. Lots of people came out to see us, which was very reassuring, and lots of people very, very excited to hear the From a Page music. And also I played an awful lot of stuff from my sort of solo and collaborative career. So I was playing pieces that I'd written for the Anam Cara album that I did a couple of years ago. We also played some music from the Mother's Ruin record that was re-released in mid-March. And then there was some music from the albums I'd worked on with Gordon Giltrap and Clive Nolan. So it was it was quite a varied set. And I threw in a couple of other sort of little surprises here and there as well, which were good fun. And you asked about Arthur, and there's just a few sections in some of the pieces in the second half where I literally physically didn't have enough hands to do all the parts. And so I sort of said to Arthur, look, do you fancy coming out and just playing some second keyboards on some of the tracks? And that was nice. He was up for it, and it was a good experience for him. He came out and sort of helped on the merch stand and joined in the second half of the show. And it was nice for him to sort of see sort of what that life is like. And he kept saying to me, "Oh, you're staying up really late." It's like, this is part of the job, getting used to the sort of unsociable hours, and the fact that you finish talking to everybody at the end of the night, maybe an hour after the show's finished, and you're still talking and signing stuff. And then he's like, "Well, what do we do now?" And it's like, "Well, now we drive for 3 hours to get home." And he's like, "What?" So it was quite an eye opener for him, but I think he quite enjoyed it. He enjoyed the whole experience of it. So it was it was good fun to have him out there as well. So it's always it was just nice to do something with him, to be honest.
That's great. And Adam chimes in again saying Huntington Hall show was fabulous on Saturday. So another question that came to mind for me is there a chance of any of these From a Page shows getting recorded for a live album or even a video release?
Possibly. We've recorded one show so far, but I don't know whether we'll, the first shows are always a bit tricky because you're still sort of finding your feet.
Right.
But you never know. We may have lucked into some good performances. But I think if we can record some stuff on the second leg of the show, the second leg of the tour, which is November, if we can get a recording from one of those, I think we may be able to put something together. I'm sort of hoping so, because it's always nice to document these tours. And it's such a good band, and they're such good fun to play with. And in fact, it's one of the things that a lot of the comments have said. It's just how nice it is to see a band up there who are really enjoying themselves, as well as being musically proficient, because everybody in the band is top class musician, which is lovely. And it's but on top of that as well, they're lovely people to work with, and that's always that's a hard balance to get. Very, very good musicians who are also lovely people and who all want to work together. It's a nice dynamic.
Yeah, people definitely enjoy watching the chemistry between the musicians at the show. So it's great to hear that all of you have been having a good time playing all that material. And we're also getting the expanded edition of From a Page soon. It includes not only the tracks that were on the original 2019 release, but also alternate versions of Fly From Here tracks Into the Storm and Hour of Need, an alternate version of Aliens, which was on the Squire and Hackett album, but first debuted on the In the Present tour, the single mix of To the Moment, and even demos, including one for Don't Take No for an Answer, which eventually ended up on Fly From Here, Return Trip, featuring Steve Allen vocals on that one, on lead vocals. Walk us through the whole process of putting this expanded edition together.
Well, what happened is when we released the original From a Page, I only had access to the music that had been handed back to me. But when it got to the reissue through Mercury, Mercury had also bought the rights to Fly From Here. And that actually meant that what that meant is that Mercury owned From a Page, and they also owned Fly From Here, which meant that they owned all the tracks for both of those records. So I had a meeting with them and I said, look, forget about the A side of Fly From Here, because that was Trevor and Jeff, from start to finish practically. And I said, the B side of that record, bar one track, is basically everything that I worked on with the band when we were writing the record. So, I remember sitting in the house in Phoenix that we all rented, sitting with Chris, Steve and Alan and Benoit, and recording all the demos for all these pieces. And so I had all my keyboard parts worked out for those tracks. And, I had all the demos put together. And when we got to the studio, we recorded the first 3 tracks that came out on the original From a Page. And then we were going to go and start recording the other tracks. And then obviously Trevor Horn came in, wanted to expand the whole record out and take my tracks out and put his Fly From Here songs on. And so that's really what happened. He wanted to do that with Jeff, and to keep Chris, Steve and Alan's songs on there. My songs got binned and I got, let go from the band so that Jeff could come back in. And but when Fly From Here was with Mercury, I said to them, look, you've got recordings of these tracks here. It would be nice to maybe create the record that we were going to create at the time. And if I can get those songs back and, in the nicest sense, take off what Jeff put into those songs, because all he did was just add some parts on top of what had already been recorded. And I actually put back into it my keyboard parts that were the integral parts of the songs, which we'd all worked on. I said, we can create, the From a Page record, which is how it would have turned out had Fly From Here not happened. So had Trevor not been involved, it ends up becoming the sort of record that we would have created. Now, it may not have been exactly the record because we may have written some other pieces at the time and done some other stuff, but it's the sort of closest to getting to what we could have done. And what was nice about that was it meant that I had, extra parts from people. I could put all my keyboard parts back in, layer up the songs a little bit differently. And they sound. Into the Storm, for example, I wrote half of Into the Storm, and I could put all the parts back in, and because I listened to the version that was on Fly From Here, and to me it just sounds phenomenally empty, because all the parts that I'd written, all the little intricacies between Steve and I had all gone, and so it was like really exciting to put all those parts back in. And then I sort of listened to the song and went, that's how it should have sounded. And I did the same with Hour of Need. I put the piano part that was supposed to be back in there. I put the extra keyboard lines that were in there, because my parts are, my keyboard solo remained on that song, but all the extra parts had gone. So I put all those back in. And The Man You Always See in Me, had a whole Moog sections going on, whole Rhodes piano parts happening here and there. And so I put all those back in as well, which was really nice. And then there was a couple of other tracks that I just couldn't quite get finished up enough, because I was sort of speaking to Benoit about him re-singing some bits, but his voice still wasn't up to that work. So the next thing that I thought of, I was like, well, what else actually really represents what we did in that lineup? And I kept going back to the song Aliens that Chris wrote, and it was, I know, it ended up on the Squack It album, but it originated with Yes as a Yes piece for the present, like you said. And so what happened was I thought, right, okay, well, Steve never wanted to play it on tour. So basically it was just the 4 of us essentially. And really Chris sang it. So all Benoit was doing was some backing parts to it. So I thought, well, it's actually just me, Chris and Alan. And when we were in rehearsals for that tour, that show was about 3.5 hours long, and we only had like 10 days to rehearse it all. And it was, I was doing the whole rehearsals with a brand new keyboard rig. And I remember sort of thinking, oh, just about starting to get the hang of all this music. And then Chris said, I want to put a new song in. And I sort of went, do you now? Oh, terrific. Great. Something else to learn. And so we went, and we were in Hamilton in Canada. And we were in this big theatre place. And we went to one of the small studio rooms where they had a grand piano. And I remember sitting at the grand piano with Chris, and him explaining how he wanted it to go. And so I would sort of sit there working out this piano part, and we sort of ended up, putting it onto into the set. And when it came to doing this record, I thought, okay, how can I create the version of Aliens that we would have created had we been on the working at this time. And luckily I had the demo from Chris, which had his voice, his backing vocals, and his bass parts. And then we had alternate drum takes that Alan had done throughout the recording sessions for bits and pieces. And when I sort of started putting things together, I realized that actually, all the parts that Chris and Alan had come up with they worked really well together. And so I was able to completely rebuild Aliens and then perform the piano part that I did. And then I sort of thought to myself, right, what else would Chris have done or wanted to have done with this? And I phoned up Chris's wife, because I wanted to say, look, this is what I'm doing. And I also got in touch with Alan's wife and said, this is what I'm doing with Alan's part. And they gave me their blessing and said, no, we really want you to do this. And so then I sort of thought, right, well, what would Chris like to have done with his pieces? And one of the things that I always end up going back to with Chris's work, with his record, Fish Out of Water and Onward, was he really sort of liked the orchestra sound with things. So I thought, well, I'm going to add some orchestration stuff around this as well. So I rebuilt Aliens with, the piano and a small, excuse me, orchestra part with it, with Chris's bass and the drums. And it came out beautifully, very different to the version that was on the Squacket album, because it was essentially a stripped back how we wanted it to be live version. And I really enjoy listening to it. And I'm hoping that people will listen to that, those versions and actually go, oh wow, now we can really hear what what Yes would have done had they gone down that route, rather than the Fly From Here, Heaven and Earth, Mirror to the Sky route. We would have gone in a different direction, and I would probably say a more dual pronged approach to musicality, because I think Steve and I sort of bounced off each other quite well with the way that we perform. And I think Jeff and Steve have a different sort of performance relationship with each other. So I'm looking forward to seeing what people think. There's going to be some people that hate it, and there's going to be some people that really like it. It's the way these things work. But I really enjoyed my time with Yes, and I really enjoyed working on the songs with them. And I sort of thought, well, this is such a good opportunity to do something a bit different. And also, there's all the demo bits on the back as well, which is like we did a sort of, me, Benoit, and Steve did an acoustic version of the track Words on a Page. And like you said, Don't Take No for an Answer was originally one of the tracks from the sessions that we were doing, and I've got the version with Benoit singing it, not Steve singing it. Because,
oh, wow.
So that's interesting. And then there's another track in there called Updraft, which was when Alan and I would rehearse on the stage when we were doing rehearsals on the tour, and we came up with these sort of ideas that ended up being parts of Into the Storm. And so I sort of rebuilt that and put that on there so that people could hear how some of the songs were formulated and how they developed. And then there's the single mix of To the Moment, which was never on CD release. It was only a vinyl extra track before. So what I think is interesting about From a Page, and this is no disrespect to any of the other reissues of Yes records that have happened in the past, is that often with the reissues you get the record and then you'll get, you know, an alternative mix of the record, and then maybe you'll get a few demos and bits and pieces. But the From a Page reissue really is an expanded version. It really is a lot more than just here's the 4 tracks and here's a couple of the demos as well. It's, you know, it's had some real time and effort put into it to make it what I hope will be a really interesting Yes project and product for Yes fans to go and get, which will give them something different.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, you know, in my opinion, the music on From a Page is some of the most impressive Yes music, like new Yes music of the last few decades. So it's great that you've sort of gone back in time and expanded that time period, you know, are giving it more of a spotlight. And like you said, maybe some things could have turned out differently had work on the record continued with the lineup that you were part of. But to try to do all this work and get the permissions and all this stuff, it really adds a layer of authenticity to the whole thing. It really does feel oh, like a passion project, and I'm just really excited to hear this thing. I see in the comments, Jeff Cooper says the new vinyl is a beautiful thing, and Davey in the comments also says, I love all the songs on From a Page, and I'm psyched for the upcoming release. I remember seeing Yes perform Aliens live many moons ago. And so something that you brought up, Oliver, that I'm curious about, and I don't know if you have anything you can say, or if it's like maybe outside of your what you might know, but you mentioned Mercury got the rights to the original Fly From Here album with Benoit on lead vocals. Are you aware of any plans of theirs to re-release that original version?
I have no idea at the moment, I'm afraid, because I wasn't massively involved in that. Um, I don't really know. I'll be involved in the reissue of Live from Leon. That's the next one that I'll probably be involved with because I had an involvement with that. But the Fly From Here, I don't know. I probably not my world. That one, I'm afraid.
Okay, fair enough. Live from Leon, any estimate on when that could be, or is it still in early planning stages?
I think it's still in early planning stages at the moment. But you know, I go searching through archives to see if there's anything that I can put together that I think would be interesting. Because ultimately, you know, I'm also a music fan and I buy records and I know what, you know, I know what I would like to hear on records and do. And I want, you know, you want people to feel like they're getting something. And the thing about Live from Leon is you can't get it anymore. It's completely unavailable. It's so hard to get hold of. So I'm looking forward to working on that one in some form or another. The other thing that what was quite interesting is that, you know, we have had some reports back from people that have actually listened to the new From a Page, because I was lucky enough to get a couple of boxes in advance, which I managed to get out for the merch desk for the tour we just did. So there are some people actually that managed to get hold of it in advance. So and I've had some nice comments back from those people that have said, "Wow, it sounds great." So it's only about a week away now, isn't it, till release? It's that 23rd April, something like that.
Yeah, maybe the 24th. And yeah, I see in the comments, Jeff also says, From a Page feels like a new, fully formed Yes album. And that's absolutely the best compliment I can give it. Regarding Live from Leon, I vaguely remember there might have been some video content from that, or maybe from around that period back in the day. So I don't know if that would also be part of the upcoming reissue, but I think that would be great to include as well, you know, the visual and the audio component.
The visual is owned by somebody else, but
okay.
I will keep talking to them because I would love to get that footage or get the rights to that footage. And because in an odd sort of way, somebody owns the footage and then somebody else owns the audio, and it just needs somebody in between to go, look, neither of you can really make a DVD or a Blu-ray or whatever out of this. unless you both come together. So I'm quite tempted to sort of have a word, but how much influence I'll be able to do with that, I don't know. But it would be lovely to pull that together, because we recorded the Leon show, and it was a great show. It was a good fun show. It was well performed, and it was we got some nice footage. But the difficulty with the footage is that we recorded 2 nights, and one of the nights, I can't remember what happened with it, but there was a few technical things on the night before. But because it was done with it was done with the new 3D cameras at the time, and so because they were so limited with the equipment they had to sort of film 2 of us on one night and then 3 of us the next night. And so I don't know how good the footage will be. It might be brilliant for, I don't know, maybe Steve and Alan and Benoit, but dreadful for me and Chris. I don't know until I see it all. I don't really know. But it's one of those questions I will ask, because I think it was a nice part of our history. It would be nice to have it documented.
Yeah, and in the comments, Ray mentioned the 3D video as well. I think we might have talked about that a while ago. He was wondering if that's still in the vaults. So,
Still
yeah,
in the
I
vault.
guess.
Unfortunately, it's not in my vault, so I can't do enough about it, I'm afraid.
Right, but yeah, like talking between the people who would be involved with all that would be worth a shot. It would be a great package.
I'll give it a go.
Yeah. So for the new From a Page expanded edition, what was it like trying to decide on the tracking order? Did you try listening to them in different configurations, like different track
Yeah,
lists?
I did a couple of things. I mean, one of the other things that I did do with this, I didn't do this, I spent a lot of time working on it myself as to how I wanted it to go. And then I did go down and see Steve Howe. I sort of phoned him up and I said, look, I've done all this work. I've done all this stuff. It would be nice if we just got together and you heard it, so that you can, give it your seal of approval. And so I drove down to his house, and we sat down, and first thing we did was sat down and chatted for an hour about everything else under the sun, and then suddenly realized that actually we were there to do some work, so we should probably sit down and listen to the record. And it was nice because Steve and I all did quite well. And so we sat down, and I said to him, like, so this is all the stuff. And there were some tracks that he said, no, let's not do those. There were some jam sessions that we did with live in the studio, just us jamming around some ideas. And he was like, no, I'm not so keen on doing that. Let's not put those sort of bits and pieces on. And then we had there was an extra piece at the end of the record that I thought might be quite fun, but he wasn't so keen on that going on, which was when we first turned up at the place that we were going to write the songs for. I'd written a song on the aeroplane, oddly enough. I'd come up when we'd gone to do a show in Mexico about a week before, and as I was flying on the aeroplane, what happened was we left Mexico City and flew up to whatever height it was in the aeroplane, and then because we were flying into a place called Zacatecas, which is on top of a mountain, you never actually landed. You just got to a certain height on the aeroplane and stayed there, and the airport came to you at that height, and so you just sort of got to, I don't know, whatever it was, 5,000 feet, 6,000 feet, whatever it was, and eventually the mountain just came to you and you just landed on it. And I remember as we were flying in between the mountains, I was looking out the windows of the airplane, and I could see sort of old buildings built high up in the mountains, and there were churches and old abandoned buildings. And I thought, wow. And I came up with this line of history on both sides. And so I started writing all these lyrics, and then I sort of got hold of a guitar whilst I was in Zacatecas and sort of wrote this song idea. And the first thing we did when we arrived at the house in Phoenix about a week later to do the writing was Chris and Alan were there, Benoit was there. And I said, look, I've come up with this idea for a song. And I played it to them, and they just sort of go, oh, that's really cool. And we started singing it all together. And then Steve turned up and said, oh, I've got a chorus idea for that. And I just put a dictaphone on the table and just recorded this song. So I've got me, Chris, Alan, and Steve. So me and Steve playing 2 acoustic guitars, and Chris, Alan, and Benoit and me all singing along to this track. And it's terrible sound quality, but I thought it might be quite fun. But Steve was like, no, the quality of that is really, quite poor. We can't use that. So I will probably pull that piece apart at some point and put it on an album somewhere because it's quite a nice piece. And so anyway, so Steve and I went through these pieces and discarded a few of them, and then I played him the sort of main album as it was, the new rebuilt album. And I first thing I said to him was, I apologize for this, Steve, because the keyboards are quite high in the mix because I wanted you to hear the differences. And he got to the end of the record and I said, I'll sort the keyboard mix out. And he said, don't. He said, leave them loud. He said, that's where we would have put them on the record because we want it to sound like a proper Yes record, and the keyboards would be loud. They would be front and center for a lot of those areas, which was great, because it meant I wasn't overstepping a mark or anything or just trying to make it a keyboard show. But the guitars and keyboards are now nicely evenly balanced, and it sounds great because of it. And so to get back to your question about the track order, one of the things that I've always remembered over many years of working was when I did the 3 Ages of Magic record, which was with Steve back in 2001, I think it was.
Yeah.
It was a CD. We never did it it was never released on vinyl. It was only ever CD. I'd like to do it on vinyl at some point, but it was only CD at the time. And I was working at the track listing, and Steve gave me a bit of advice, which I've kept to this day. He said, even though it's a CD, he said, imagine it's vinyl. Imagine that you're starting a record and then finishing side 1 and then starting side 2 and finishing side 2. He said that way you're thinking of the rise and fall of one side of a record and the rise and fall of the second side of a record, which means you'll always end up in the middle of the record having some highs. So you won't end up with a dip in the middle of the record. So I've always taken that to heart of how to run a record. And whenever I do that, I always think of it in that same way. So when we were doing the From a Page record, it was like, well, okay, we know what we want to open. We want to open it with To the Moment. And we knew we wanted to finish with The Gift of Love because it was the big finish. And then it was just a case of moving the other tracks around and actually going, right, well, what's the great way of finishing side 1? Or how do we want to start side 2? But they were all such strong tracks. It didn't actually become a problem in which ones went where. What mattered more was how did each song flow into the next one. That became the next thing to think about. So that was really how we ended up working it, and that was challenging in its own way, but it was good fun. So we sort of thinking about what would follow To the Moment, and The Man You Always Wanted Me to Be seemed like the next song to do that, and then Turn of the Card, and it was like, right, well then let's finish side 1 with Into the Storm, and then we'll start side 2 with Aliens, and then you build through Hour of Need into Words on a Page, which has that lovely Steve slide solo, and then we finish with The Gift of Love. So you sort of finish in a very collaborative, band orientated sort of thematic way, and it just played really nicely. And I sort of said, I think this is the track listing, and Steve was like, yeah, I don't think we need to change that works really well. So it just came together quite naturally and organically, which was great, because it just felt right.
That's great. Yeah, To the Moment and The Gift of Love always feel like they have to be the bookends, because To the Moment really comes crashing in with that amazing sound, and The Gift of Love has that callback with the lyric from the moment of awakening, so it feels like a full circle type of thing. So I quite like that. And whenever I listen to the track Words on a Page, I imagine sailing going on thanks to the Roger Dean artwork, and the lyrics. Yeah, the lyrics mention travel, but I don't think they mention sailing specifically in that track, and that's the magic of the art. But something that occurred to me just the other day is that on the From a Page album cover, there's water travel, whereas on Fly From Here, there's air travel via the bird in the art. So was the water travel an intentional contrast against the air travel, or was it just that Roger wanted to work in the world of that redone Close to the Edge artwork from 2018?
Yeah, Roger. I mean, he basically gave me two pieces of artwork, which was the inner sleeve, which was the blue imagery, which I absolutely loved, and he had this front cover imagery. For those that don't know, if you look at Close to the Edge 2 or Close to the Edge 3, you can actually see the island actually in the top of the picture. It's actually in the hidden waterfall area. You can see this tiny little island with a boat in front of it. So this front cover from a page is actually sort of again an expanded version of that Close to the Edge cover. It's like a real zoomed in part, which I actually quite liked. I remember saying to Roger at the time, I really liked that link because bearing in mind, Dad was on Close to the Edge, and then here we are many years later, zooming in on his son working with Yes in a different way. So I really like the connection that From a Page had to Close to the Edge. Um, and I remember umming and ahhing for a long time between the front and back covers and thinking maybe we should make the blue cover the rock formations of the front cover, because I love Roger's work with rock formations and things like that, and the callback to sort of the blue structure that's in it, and the callback to how that goes to the ABWH record and things like that. And I sort of thought, oh, maybe should I do the blue cover? Maybe we should make that the front cover. But then the thing about that sailing element, besides not just the Close to the Edge bit, was a lot of the Yes records recently have had an awful lot of detail going on. There's been an awful lot of stuff going on, and particularly if you look at Fly From Here, there's quite a lot of imagery going on within a small space. And I actually quite liked the idea that From a Page was a little bit more open and had a little bit more space around it. And so it had a definitive focal point, which I really liked, and I loved the tree, and I loved the boat, and I loved the sort of little buildings off the rock formations, and it was I sort of thought, yeah, do you know what? I think that needs to be the cover because it will make it stand out a little bit more against other Yes records, and that's again one of the things that I liked about Close to the Edge was that it was and Fragile is that they had definitive focal points. And so I sort of thought, yeah, I like that From a Page. So I sort of thought, right, we'll stick with the boat on the front and go for the blue imagery in the middle.
Yeah, it's a really great piece of art. And Harry Whitley chimes in saying pre-ordered regarding
Thank
the
you.
From a Page expanded edition. And yeah, I've pre-ordered the vinyl format for it, so really looking forward to that. And Adam Parrish chiming in again says Live from Leon is one of my favorite live Yes albums. So there you go with that.
Oh, that's kind. Yeah, I enjoyed working on Live from Leon. It was a labor of love. I remember we recorded the shows, and I remember the tour manager coming up to us all and saying, right, I've got 5 shows here of everybody's parts and everybody's shows. I need somebody to go through it all and see which shows are the best ones to do, and it's going to be hours and hours and hours of work, and then we've got to find somebody to mix it, and then we're going to have to do all the work on the pre-production and getting it all together. And he sort of looked at Chris Stephen Allen, who just went, no, not really interested in doing that. And I went, I'll do it. And so I took it away and sort of produced that record and pulled it all together and worked very closely with Carl Groom, who's engineered pretty much all of my records. And worked again with Carl on From a Page, and he's just got an excellent ear for making live records sound great. He's done so much work in that field, and it was really nice because the first thing he picked up on was like, right, we've got to make sure Chris's bass sounds the way it would sound on stage. We've got to get the right sound for Chris, otherwise it's not going to sound right. And then we've got to make sure Alan and Chris are well defined in the mix, and so it was lovely. We just worked together, and I could say, well, no, that bit's missing because we did this bit on stage as well. And he'd go, oh, yeah, I found that part. And it was lovely. And then I just brought it back to everybody, and they all went, oh, yeah, sounds great. Thanks. and then it came out after I'd left. So, I just remember getting sent a copy, and it was like, oh, right, okay, great. So I'm sort of hoping to be a bit more involved in it when it gets its reissue at some point.
Right. And it's very apt that this expanded re-release of From a Page is coming out just a few days after Benoit's 60th birthday, I think it is. And this is hypothetical, but if in the future, if Benoit's ever up for it, if you two were ever to work together again, do you think it would be in a band capacity, even if in the studio, or more of a duo type of project? And again, this is hypothetical.
Um, well, I would work with Benoit like a shot. We speak quite regularly. Yeah, 'cause it's Benoit's birthday on the 19th. He's only a few days away.
Yeah.
Um, so I must give him a call. Is he going to be 60? Is he 60? Is he that much older than
Yeah.
me? Oh yeah, he is. Yeah, I've got it in my calendar there. I thought he was late 50s. Yeah, 60. Crikey, I need to give him a call. Got a big white beard. Last time I spoke to him, big white beard. Um, I would do. It depends on how his vocals handle it. To be honest with you, and the difficulty with working with people is that in order to do a project, you often have to go out and play it live. You have to go and tour it. And I know he still suffers with his voice from the damage that occurred to it when he was on the S tours. So I know that's you'd always have to bear that in mind, that it would only ever be a recorded piece of work,
Right.
which means that you're always going to have to replace him with somebody else to do the work live, which means that then people might not be as interested in seeing it live because it's not got Benoit. Do you know what I mean? It's slightly different with me doing my From a Page band, because that was my band doing music from sort of across my career. But if you did a specific album with me and Benoit, it would be odd if then Benoit wasn't there to do the live work. But you never know. We might do something. He might make a guest spot appearance somewhere. But it's, I he sort of did retire from music, and
Right.
he's not he always thoroughly enjoyed the Yes shows. He thoroughly enjoyed meeting people, and he thoroughly enjoyed doing all the work. But when he left, I think he was like, he ticked a box. He doesn't have that burning desire to be a musician constantly. He was quite happy to go back to his old life and carry on. Whereas someone like me, I've just been, since the day I stopped working with Yes, I've been working with other people constantly for the last 15 years. And I just think we just have different paths. But I would work with him like a shot. And we always catch up. And when we start talking, we just start reminiscing and talking about everything. And it's great. It's lovely. It's really nice. I see
Yeah.
posters on the wall and go, oh, I haven't got that one. And he says, oh, that was from Westfield or wherever.
That's great. Yeah. So switching over to solo works, I see in the comments Gilly asks, what draws Oliver to Irish Celtic music, like on Ankara?
Um, the instrument sound. I love different things. I love the myths and the imagery that comes out of sort of that Celtic um, life approach. I love the history behind it. I love the myths and legends that come from it, and I love the sound of the violin. I love the sound of the Ilian pipes, and it was. I did use those instruments on the Three Ages of Magic, and in some ways, Anam Cara, that has a sort of spirit, is almost like a spiritual follow up to Anam Cara. Anam Cara is a spiritual follow up to Three Ages of Magic, even though musically they're very different. And it felt like that because on Three Ages of Magic, I used a violinist, I used a whistle, I used Ilian pipes to help enhance some of the pieces. And basically, it's the same with Three Ages of Magic. They started off as keyboard parts and keyboard solos, and it was like, actually, this song has got a feel of that sort of imagery in the stories that I was trying to write. And I thought, well, let's just take them off. Let's get them done by whistles. Let's get them done by pipes. Let's get violins in. Let's change this around, And having somebody like Troy Denockley who can play Ilian pipes, low whistles, tin whistles, everything. And then my friend Robert McClung, who's a fantastic violinist, who was able to play, some quite complicated violin parts. And then having Haley, who has actually worked with Riverdance and Lord of the Dance, and somebody that actually is, respected as a singer of that sort of music, it just sort of felt completely natural. And so I just sort of thought I just wanted to do the whole record this way, and I loved it. And it's I just get to a point with records that they feel like they've got an identity, and it's like a collection of music. I always talk about it, my buckets of music, and I have buckets of music where I collect songs that I think will work together. So I don't sort of go, okay, I'm going to start writing a record now, and I'm going to release it with the next 12 songs. I sort of have these collections of pieces of music um, that I then think, okay, these will work together. And then I get to a certain point and think, okay, I've got a nice collection of music now that will work on this record. And then I sort of find the identity for the record. And with Adam Cara, it was like, okay, I think all these songs work together musically. I think they all match each other in a sort of style of songwriting, and they match each other in a style of story that I'm trying to tell on each song. And then it was just a matter of finding the musicians that I knew would help enhance the songs. And I just love working like that. The next record I do, I'll change again. It'll be probably a lot of the same people, but it'll probably be a bit more of a rock record, because obviously I reissued Mother's Ruin last month, and it will be nice to work with everybody, and thinking actually it'd be nice to do the follow-up to Mother's Ruin now, which would be a nice rock record again, because I haven't done one of those for a while. But instead of just being the same guys that were on the Mother's Ruin record, doing it with the band that I currently play with, that will make it different again. I'm not very good at doing the same thing over and over again. Terrible. I like doing different things. I like exploring.
Yeah, it adds more variety. That brings me to Mother's Ruin. Like we were talking about that with you last time in the lead up to it, and your talk about finding the identity of an album reminds me when I listened to that reissue of Mother's Ruin, and I actually have my CD copy here. I noticed some recurring thematic elements in the lyrics. So I was wondering, do you consider Mother's Ruin a concept album?
Uh, yes and no in places. It's a bit like Adam Cara, in so much as it's not a concept album from start to finish, but it has a collective theme that goes across the record. And it started with actually the track Mother's Ruin itself, which was, it's an ecological track. And I'd like to think that I wrote it over 20 odd years ago. So I was maybe slightly ahead of the curve. And it was just basically about, and it's not, I'm not saying it was like over the top eco stuff. It was just more like common sense stuff, and I started writing about these sort of things, and I've always been interested in nature and the planet and how things work together. I find it fascinating. And jumping back to the 3 Ages of Magic, I wrote a song called The Whale's Last Dance, which was about whale beachings, which was, about whales and why they did that. I just found it confusing and sad. And so when it came to Mother's Ruin, it was more about sort of, we can't keep doing what we're doing. Right. But that doesn't mean that we go completely one way. It's just like, well, maybe there are sensible ways of doing things that we can be a little bit, more thoughtful about. It doesn't mean that everybody has to completely change the way they live, but maybe if we all sort of thought about it a slightly different way, we might be able to make a bit of a change. And so that sort of gave me that idea. And then it ended up becoming a sort of album where I sort of had things that had bugged me, or things that I felt were wrong, or things that, I sort of wanted to write about. And so I ended up writing sort of little stories again, like I did with Adam Cara, which was, The Agent is a song about an unscrupulous person that once tried to rip me off over something. And I sort of, wow. Instead of being, people are dreadful and writing horrible things about people, I just think that I'm going to make a story out of it, because that's quite fun. You can sort of do this villainesque type song about it. And then you've got Wall of Water, that was written about one day I got up on a Sunday morning after doing a late gig, and I was going down to the local off license to get myself a bottle of wine for the evening or for the afternoon. And on my way down there, I bumped into this drunk chap who was very charming and very polite, and hello, how are you, blah, 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 blah. And then on the way back, as I walked back past him, he was really abusive, borderline violent. And I sort of thought,
oh, wow.
He literally changed personality. And I sort of thought, God, it's like it's just like he's been picked up by a wall of water and just carried off, and it's this alcoholism has taken over his life, and just he can't fight the tide of it. And so I went back and wrote this piece of music about it, and so it basically came from that, about how like Don't Come Running is about a friendship going wrong, and you end up sort of writing these pieces of music about the sort of struggle against. So hopefully I'm back. And that was how I
Yeah, you're
played
back.
that record. So it's not a concept as such, but it has a sort of a theme of, fighting against adversity. I think is probably the theme of Mother's Ruin. And Mother's Ruin, actually comes from a drink. It's actually a type of gin which was utilized by people. You can read up about it. It's not very pleasant. But I actually sort of thought, I was thinking about Mother's Earth, and we're ruining the possibility of ruining a planet. And I sort of
Yeah.
thought I quite liked that themology, and that's why I like the front cover with it's almost like a tear of flame and a tear of blood coming off of a planet, and that's sort of I just kind of like that imagery for the whole record.
Yeah, and I also noticed that the re-release came out a couple days before Mother's Day in the UK. Was that intentional or was that coincidence?
No, that's just coincidence. Yeah, nothing
Okay.
that nothing that planned.
All right. Well, it's a great record, and as with From a Page, it's great that we get to hear the alternate versions of certain songs as well. When you go back and re-release something, it's always great when there are these bonus tracks that really add glimpses of these other things that were going on around the time.
Yeah, for those that are interested in the Mother's Ruin, if you're listening from America, there is the advantage that for some reason the American version was printed on translucent green vinyl. So the American version of Mother's Ruin is actually quite a limited version. So if anybody's interested in it,
All right.
get it before they all go.
Yeah, check it out, folks. So, is there anything else that you're working on that you're allowed to talk about? Anything you want to leave people with before we sort of
Um,
close this out?
I, I suppose the only thing is obviously I'm going to start working on the next record with the band, because we're going to be touring From a Page to the end of this year and then early next year. So we'll probably be touring this show for a year, which is what generally you do with a record or a tour. You sort of have a show that you take out. But I need to get another record written so that it's, by the time we get to the next tours, which will be around next summer, we'll be able to start, promoting a new record, which I'm looking forward to doing. Um, I'm doing another collaborative project with somebody, which I can't mention yet because we're still in the early stages of writing it, but I'm looking forward to that project a great deal. And then I'm sort of, hopefully, as we said at the beginning, there's some shows with Dad later in the year as well. So I've got a very busy year. And the From a Page tour, we're going to be going back out around UK, up into Scotland. And then we're also going out into the Netherlands and Germany, which will hopefully lead to more shows in March, April time in 2027, which sounds like a long time away, but it's actually, it's 11 months away. It soon comes round. So we're we're that's really, if people want to come and see us play, please do come and see us play. We had wonderful turnouts for the first 4 shows of the tour, and 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 the support of people coming out to the live shows really helps, because if we get good attendances for shows, then other promoters want to take the show on, and then more promoters take the shows on, then people can take the risk of taking the band out into other countries, which is ultimately what we'd love to do. But unfortunately, playing live and touring is quite an expensive endeavor, particularly if you're going out,
Right.
away from the country. So if people come out and support us, it would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks again for taking the time for this, Oliver. Sharing the backstories and insights that really add a bit more to the music listening experience to all these different projects.
That was a pleasure. No, it's always nice. It's always nice to catch up. I'm still suffering a little bit, not quite with jet lag, but with exhaustion from the tour with Dads and the tour we've just finished. So I'm sort of looking for. I think I've got a day off on Sunday. I'm looking forward to it. It's my first day off in like 11 weeks. I'm sort of. It's like I just sort of keep looking at the calendar, going, "How long till Sunday? How long till Sunday?"
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it'll be here before we know it. So thanks again. And thank you to the audience for tuning in, whether it be live or after the fact. You can follow Yesshift via @Yesshift on Facebook and YouTube. You can also search us at Podcast app. You'll probably find us, and write to us via yesshiftpodcast@gmail.com. So thanks, everyone, and we will see you all soon. Bye.
Lovely. Bye bye.